Hello students, so let us go through today the chapter Federalism, which is the second chapter of political science. So in our first chapter we all have studied how power sharing is done and how it is important and good for us, good for any country as such. So now we come to the second chapter, that is Federalism, and it is somewhat related to, or you have got a bit of it in the first chapter, that is when we studied the forms of power sharing. And there we studied that a country like Belgium, which shared its power amongst the central and state and regional and communities, they had a better peaceful and stable condition compared to Sri Lanka, which failed to do so, and it resulted in a violent situation and a civil war. So that is what it is mentioned in the starting part of the chapter. They have compared both the countries and their situations, and they have shown how Belgium, by making some amendments in their constitution in the year 1993, they made those changes through which the central government of Belgium started sharing more powers from to the states, and that is how it became a full-fledged federation. So Belgium shifted from a unitary to a federal form of government, whereas we see that Sri Lanka still continues to be a federal country, a unitary country, and that is why all the problems that people are facing in Sri Lanka, somewhere they have connection to this same thing, that is concentration of power into one hand or majoritarianism. So Tamil leaders of Sri Lanka are also demanding Sri Lanka to be a federal country so that they can also have some autonomy. So for us to first understand, let us go through the definition of federalism. What is federalism? So as you can see, federalism can be defined as a system of government in which the power is divided between a central authority and various constituent units of the country. So here powers are divided among the center and the states. So mostly what happens is, in a federation there are two levels of government, that is central, and the constituent units, that is state. But in some cases there can be three levels also, like we saw in case of Belgium, there was a community government. So in case of India, we have a third level of government, which is also called as the local self government, or the panchayat and municipality, as they are majorly known, commonly known. So here in this world map that you see, the countries which are colored in red or orange, those countries are federal countries, and the other ones are not federal, as an opposite to federal. So you can see many big countries are there who practice federalism. Now, what are the countries called which are not federalism? So there has to be something which is opposite of federalism. So it is called as unitary. So federations and unitaries are like contrast forms of government. Under the unitary system, what happens is, either there is only one level of government, that is, there is only central government, no state governments, or it happens that the subunits, that is the state governments and the subordinates, means the constituent units, are subordinate to the central government. The word subordinate means they are low in power to the central government. So that is seen very commonly, and in unitary governments the powers mostly are in the hands of the central, whereas in federalism you see the powers are mostly divided by the center amongst all the states. Now let us come to some of the features of federalism. As you see here, the very first feature is the most obvious feature, that is, there are two or more levels of government. Like we also have we have more than two levels of government actually, that is central, state, and the local level of government. Then the second is that different tiers of government govern the same citizens, but each has its own jurisdiction in matters of legislation, taxation, and administration, which means that we are both a citizen of India and a resident of our own state. Say, for example, I am a resident of Assam. So I am a citizen of India and at the same time a resident of Assam. So I am under both the state government and the central government. But in matters of legislation, that is lawmaking, taxation, that is collecting tax, and administration, like administrational works. So for all these things, rules are made, and properly it is divided and said that which tier of government or which level of government will make law in what. The third point is related to this one, as in, because it says that the jurisdiction of the respective level or tiers of government are specified in the constitution. So in the constitution everything is mentioned, that it is guaranteed that which government will get what rights, and they will perform what duties, and they will collect tax from where. Now comes the fourth feature, that is, the fundamental provisions of the constitution cannot be unilaterally changed by one level of government. Cannot be unilaterally, as in cannot be changed by one party, by one side, as in only state governments cannot change any basic fundamental very important rule of the constitution. It requires the agreement of both the sides, of all the sides rather, then only any basic rule can be changed. Next comes the fifth feature, that is, courts have the power to interpret the constitution and the powers of different levels of government. It acts as an umpire, like in a game of cricket there is an umpire to tell what is right, what is wrong, what is out or not out. So in case our state or central governments have some issue, who will decide? So it is the courts, supreme courts, high courts, they'll give the decision. They are kind of a guardian of the constitution or custodian. Supreme court is called as the guardian of the Indian constitution. That is, if there is something in the constitution which people are not able to understand, or there is a clash over it, then it is the work of the Supreme Court to clarify that doubt and make it interpretable for everyone, and explain it. The sixth feature is that the sources of revenue for each level of government are clearly specified to ensure its financial autonomy. So where they will get their revenue, where the state government and the central government will collect their taxes or fines, or what are their sources of income, everything is mentioned, so that everyone has their financial autonomy, as in no one has to ask to each other. Like state government should not keep asking to central government for money for everything. They have their own autonomy, as in their own power to do, or like, to do their tasks or whatever responsibilities they have in the government. The last feature is that the federal system has a dual objective. Now what do they mean by dual objective? Two objectives. First is to safeguard and promote unity of the country. So you have to make the country one, like you have to make India as one country also. At the same time, they also have to accommodate regional diversity. So regional diversity has to be recognized and appreciated and accommodated. Like you are an Indian and you have to live in unity with all Indians, but at the same time we have to recognize the fact that a person is Tamil, or a person is Kashmiri, or a person is Gujarati, or a person is from Arunachal. So they have their own cultures and we have to recognize that. So this is the meaning of this point. So these are the features of a federal nation, and it's actually very tough to maintain the balance, like we studied in the last point, that the two aspects are very crucial to maintain federalism. So governments have at different levels, like central government, state government, and at local levels also, they should agree to certain rules and they should trust each other. That is how this ideal federal system can work. So for that we need two things, that is, it is mentioned, mutual trust and agreement to live together. Then only we can have a successful federal system. Now, to maintain this exact balance, it in some countries it is maintained very nicely. Some federations are working very well. On the other hand, some federations have some problems. Now, this thing comes mostly from the history of where the problem started, for in the sense how the country became a federation. So there can be two types of federation actually. One is coming together federation, and another one is holding together federation. So as by the words you can understand very clearly, coming together and holding together federation. So in coming together federation, what happens is countries by themselves, they come willingly and join and make a federation. Some examples are USA, Switzerland, Australia, and all these countries. On the other hand, holding together federation, as you can understand by the name, these are the countries which are not like very willingly came, and that is why they have to divide their power between the constituent states. And in that case, what happens, some constituent states gets more power, some constituent state gets less power. So those kind of countries are some examples, that is India, Spain, Belgium are the examples. Let's talk about India a bit. Why India is a holding together federation? Because when India got independence, some of the states of India were not very likely to come and merge into the country, but then they were kind of forced to merge into the country, and that is why we are calling it a holding together federation. And that is the exact reason why some of the states or some of the union territories that we have, they don't share the same power, they have less power, some have more power. So there is a difference in power. Whereas what happens in a in a coming together federation is that in a coming together federation, all the constituent units have equal power. That is the difference between holding together and coming together federation. Now let us move to the next part. So here, what makes India a federal country? Now, how can you say, like we just now read that India is a federal country, but how can we say that it's a federal country? What means, how can it be proved? So they are saying that again they're going back to the example of Belgium and Sri Lanka, and they said that they had diversity in their country, French speaking, Dutch speaking, some German as well, even in Sri Lanka. But if you say in that way, our country is like more diverse than those countries. So let us first start understanding that what rules and all are there in our constitution, given in our constitution, which has made India a federation. Now when India got independence, at that time itself, it was kind of decided, though not in word, the exact word federalism was not used in the constitution, but everyone knew that powers are going to be divided amongst or between whom. At that time it would was a two-tier system of government. That is, we had a central or union government which would look after the whole country and the whole thing, and there would be state government which would look after the states. So later a third tier, that is the municipality and panchayat, was joined. So as in any federation, these different tiers enjoy separate jurisdiction. They all have separate jurisdiction, what they will do, where they will make laws, and where they will collect taxes. Now, for that purpose, our constitution has provided a threefold distribution of legislative powers between the union and the state governments. So what is that threefold distribution of legislative powers? Let us see that. So what happens is, these lists, known as the union, state and the concurrent list, are given in our constitution, and in these lists all the topics or subjects are mentioned on which the respective governments can make laws. So the first list, that is the union list, it includes the subject of national importance such as defense, foreign affairs, banking, communication, currency, every topic which should be similar in the whole country, which should be uniform in the whole country, is part of the union list. Secondly, we come to state list. Now state list is on that list which consists of subjects of local importance such as police, trade, commerce, agriculture, irrigation, all these topics, day to day matters, and mostly things which are not of much state, as in not of much national importance. The third one is concurrent list, which here is missing, but that is due to the print of this book. But if it's in your book, well and good. If it is not, you can just mark it here, writing concurrent list. Now concurrent list is the third list. This list includes subjects or topics which are of common purpose. That is, both central and state can make laws on this concurrent list. So what topics it includes? Some of the topics are mentioned here. See, forest, union, trade unions, marriage, adoption, succession. Topics which both central and state can make laws. So in case there is a conflict between them regarding a law, the union government's law will prevail, because just now we studied that India is a holding together federation. So what happens in a holding together federation is that the central government is always a bit more powerful than the state governments. Now, there are some subjects which came later. They are not part of any of these subjects. What about them? They are known as the residuary subjects. So the residuary subjects are the one on which the central government make laws. So topics like software, computer software, or artificial intelligence, which are new. So they are not part of union list or state list or concurrent list. So they are called as residuary subjects, and central makes laws on them. Now, if you see that federations which are formed by holding together, for example, India, they do not give equal powers to their all constituent units. Just now we discussed. So some states enjoy special status. For example, here they are talking about some northeastern states like Assam, Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram. These states get some special powers under the Article 371. So all rules and applications, all rules and regulations are not applicable sometimes. Sometimes it is like certain things like outside people cannot buy a land here unless and until they are a permanent resident. These laws were also applicable in Jammu and Kashmir till 2019, but after Article 370 was revoked, these rules were changed. So like this, in our country there are some places or states which get some special power, and there are some which maybe get less power. Among the places which get less power are the units of Indian territory, which are known as union territories. So in union territories, what happens is, you must have seen that places like Chandigarh, Lakshadweep, or any such place, Andaman Nicobar or Daman and Diu, they don't have a state government of their own. So they are run directly by the central government. So they do not have the exact power which a state enjoys. So here we can see again that these are the units of the country which get a bit less power. So this is seen in a holding together federation mostly. Now, this sharing of power between union and the state government is very basic to its nature. Means you cannot change it just with a simple law. To make changes to this center state or union government, state government thing, a big law is required, which requires the majority of the parties or the parliament, the members of the parliament, to agree. And even if they agree, it won't be passed unless and until the state governments agree to it. So the rule is like this. See, the parliament cannot on its own change this arrangement. Any change to it has to be first passed by both the houses of parliament, means Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha both have to agree. And after that, and that to agree with two-thirds majority, and then it has to be ratified by the legislatures of at least half of the total states. So how many states are there in India? Half of them have to agree to this, that okay, we'll change this rule. So that is how only this center state equation can be changed. Now, if you see, the judiciary here plays a very important part, because it looks after all the implementation of the constitutional rules and regulations. And as we mentioned earlier, if there is any dispute between the state governments and the central government, then they can take a decision. So they can decide that what is wrong or how to solve it. The union and state governments have the power to raise taxes by raise resources by levying taxes. So there are places like where you have to take taxes or collect taxes, and that is how you can run your state using that money. So all that is clearly mentioned in the constitution, and the state governments and the central governments can follow it for their purpose respectively. Now, if you come to the next page here, so here some cases are given where powers are shared between central and state, and it is said that how they can, uh, you know, take decisions in these matters, and in a specific matter, who will take the decision, whether it is the state government or the central government. So that is something which you can go through and you can find out. And here is a map of India also of 1947. We'll come back to this. First, let us see how is federalism practiced. So the next topic is how is federalism practiced in India. If you suppose how federalism is practiced, so just now we saw that constitutional rules and regulations are there, everything is mentioned, and it has been put into pen and paper, every rule has been laid. But everything cannot be done by rules. So the real success of federalism in India actually can be attributed to the nature of democratic politics in our country. So the kind of democratic politics which is practiced in our country, that has made the federalism in our country more successful, and it has kind of encouraged the diversity that we have in our country. Now, first you see, the first step taken after our country got independence was of making linguistic states. Now, what about linguistic states? So, when India got independence, at that time it was decided that how the states of the country would be divided, how the boundaries would be made. So, a major decision was taken back then about the linguistic states. So, states in our country were divided on the basis of languages spoken in that area. And now, if you see here this map, the present map of India, which you can see here, different states on the basis of language as they are now, and earlier, the early map, which is the old map. Here you can see a map of 1947. So here the difference, you can see that in this map there are no proper boundaries, the names of the places are different, and the places which we now know as cities, back then they were a whole province or whole area. So there are huge changes that that has been made in all these years. Now many old states like have vanished, not at all there also, so such cases are also there. Now in 1947, back in 1947, the boundaries of several old states for India were changed in order to create new states, and this was done on the basis of language. Like it was like whoever spoke the same language, they were meant to stay in the same state. Now some states were even created not on the basis of language, but to recognize differences based on culture, ethnicity, and geography. For example, Nagaland, Uttarakhand, Jharkhand. So maybe language is same, but then the community, the culture of that place is a bit different from the other place. So on that basis, also some changes or some states were carved out. Now, when this was happening, that is, when the demand for the formation of state on the basis of language was raised, some national leaders were very reluctant about it, and they said that it is not a good idea. And even the central government thought over it. But eventually, they took the decision, and now we can see that actually it was a good decision because linguistic states made it easier, that communication, they made communication easier. So in a state, any official thing can be communicated in the language which is spoken in that state. So it has been of a good use, and that kind of strengthens the idea of federalism in our country or in any country. The next thing that came, a second test which came was for Indian Federation, was the language policy. So what would be the language policy of our country? Say for example in Belgium, you saw that they made both French and Dutch would be used for everything. So what about our country? So in our country, it was decided that our constitution did not give the status of national language to any language because we have so many languages. But Hindi was identified as the official language, and it was decided that we would keep Hindi as the main language. But the problem is, Hindi is the mother tongue of only 40% of Indians, and therefore there were many safeguards to protect other languages. Like people who spoke other languages, they were not very happy with these decisions. So they were like, we want even our languages to be a part of or become a official language. Besides Hindi, we have 21 other languages which are part of the scheduled languages. So let me just show you that part. The schedule is given in the next page, you all can go through it. So these are the scheduled languages which are here: Assamese, Bengali, Boro, Dogri, Gujarati, Hindi, Kannada. So all percentages are given. What are the percentages of speakers in India? What percentage of people speak these languages? So if you see that Hindi has the highest speakers, and on that basis it was decided that Hindi would be made the official language. For that time being, English was used, but it was decided that further we will do that. But because there were lot of protests and lot of disagreements by other people and the people who speak other languages, that's why the decision was changed. So what happened is, even now a candidate in our country who is giving any examination for the central government may opt to take the examination in any of these languages, that is these 21 languages. Just now we saw the list. And states to have their own official language. So they have, like for example, I live in Assam, so the government of Assam, all the official work is done in Assamese and English. So like that, for Tamil Nadu, maybe Tamil and English, or whatever other languages they have. So this was the language policy, or this is the language policy now, that other languages were also taken into consideration in India. Unlike Sri Lanka, like in Sri Lanka, what happened was, in Sri Lanka they made the use of Sinhalese compulsory. However, in India, things were not like that. When many non-Hindi speaking states demanded that use of English should continue, even like in place like Tamil Nadu, this movement took a very violent form, and the central government had no other option but to agree that they'll continue the use of English along with Hindi for official purpose. So now Hindi, English both are used by the central government for official purposes. Many critics think that this solution favored the English speaking elite of our country as well. But then it is good for maintaining the stability and peace of the country, because there were many non-Hindi speakers who did not like this language policy decision by taken by our government. But our government keeps promoting Hindi. Now, promotion of Hindi done by our government is more of a cautious decision taken by our government, because they don't impose Hindi, but they have shown flexibility, as in how, that is, our country has open schools, like Hindi medium schools. They have gone for some programs, and they have made some institutions and organizations who promote the Hindi language, but they don't impose the Hindi language. That is the decision taken by our government, which has proved to be very good for everyone of us in the country, so that we can avoid a situation something like Sri Lanka, which is happening in Sri Lanka. So now let us come to the center state relations and this part of federalism. Now, for a federalism to work well, the center state relation has to be good. And it has been seen that how the constitutional arrangements for sharing power work in reality depends to a large extent on how the ruling party and leaders follow this arrangement. So, if there is a clash between the ruling party in the center and the state, then things may not work very well. So in India, for a long time, the same party ruled both at the center and in most of the states. I guess you all know, at that time it was Congress. So Congress ruled both in the center and in the states also. So in that case, what happens? The state governments did not exercise their rights as autonomous federal units, which means they were mostly under the central government. Whatever the central government said, they used to do that, because they belong to the same party and they had to kind of follow what their big leaders were saying. So as and when the ruling party at the state level was different, what happened is the parties that ruled at the center tried to undermine the power of the states. So they were trying to exploit, or they were trying to overpower the state governments. There were clashes. The central government didn't like sharing powers with the state government if the party was different. So in those days, the central government would often misuse the constitution to dismiss the state governments, whichever were controlled by some other party, like rival parties. And due to this, what happened? The spirit of federalism got undermined. Means it was a it was not a very good thing to happen in a federalism. But thankfully, all these things changed in the year 1990. Why? Because in the year 1990, many regional political parties came up in India, and it kind of brought the beginning of coalition government, what we know as coalition government, as in a government which is made by like two or more parties coming together. When no one gets majority, then all the parties, or whichever parties feel that they can come together and they share the similar ideals, they form the government together and they become allies, or that kind of, they come into an alliance. So in that case what happens is, the central government, whether willingly or unwillingly, but has to share powers with the state government. So this led to the culture of power sharing and respect for the autonomy of state governments. So like in Assam right now also, you can see that BJP, though BJP is there ruling, but they are forming a coalition government. They are sharing their powers with some local parties which are their allies. So here, see, this was the condition earlier with when there was, central government was all powerful and all the states are kind of coming to them for powers, and they are almost like begging type of situation. So here, this is not a proper federalism. You cannot say this is federalism. Here, the power of federalism is undermined. But slowly things changed, and different coalition governments were formed. One such example is this. This is a coalition government where you can see the BJP ruled in back in 2000, 1, 2, 3, 4, around that time when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the prime minister of our country. And you can see all these faces on the seat of the prime minister, which signifies that all these people are joining together, coming together to make the government. So that is a coalition government. Now, this thing which happened in our country regarding the coalition and all the regional parties coming together, it was supported by a major judgment of the Supreme Court that made it difficult for the central government to dismiss state governments in an arbitrary manner. That means no more any government in power in the center can do anything to the state governments or local governments. Thus, federal power sharing is more effective today than it was earlier. So, with time, things have changed, and we can see that. If we come to the next page here about the linguistic diversity of India, it is given that we have so many languages. All are mentioned here. Many languages are there in the census, 121 major languages, but only 22 of them are part of the scheduled languages, including Hindi. So, India being a diverse country, we have all these different language speakers who live together peacefully in a country because that country has chosen to be a federal country and not a country where the majority speaker rules. Coming to the next page here, some portions are given, some extracts are given from Mr. Ramachandra Guha's article. He is a historian who has said about the language policy in our country, linguistic states of the country. So you can go through these quotes and understand that what people thought of all these rules and regulations or all these legislations that were made back then, and whether they were right or wrong in their suggestion, in their thoughts. So decentralization in India is the last topic of this chapter. So by decentralization, what they're meaning is exactly the introduction of the third tier after central and state. Now, see, India is a very big country, we all know, and it was kind of impossible after a point to manage the whole country through these two tiers, as in the remote areas were neglected and sort. And each state in India is as large as one country of Europe. Actually, here you see Uttar Pradesh is bigger than Russia. Maharashtra is almost as big as Germany. So these all places are like one country according to their area, population, and all of that. So many of these states are internally also very diverse. There are different groups of people living who speak a different language. They have cultures are different. So it was very much required that we have a third level which has more powers to look after all these things on a more specified and deep rooted level. So federal power sharing in India needed one such tier of government below state governments, and this was the main rationale or reason for decentralization of power, which resulted in a third tier of government called the local government. So the local government that we have, which is the municipality and the panchayats, that came into being. When I say came into being, it is not like they were not there. They were always there. But the thing is, they were not recognized by the government of India. That was the thing. So now here they have described decentralization as the process that is when powers are taken from central and state and given to a local level, and that whole idea is what we study or what we are studying as decentralization. Now this idea of decentralization, the basic idea behind decentralization is that there are a large number of problems and issues which can be settled at only the local level. Means every issue of every village or chota mota thing cannot be brought to the state government, the secretariat, or the parliament. Of course, we know that. So it has to be solved by the people there, and the people have better knowledge about all those problems and how to solve it, where to spend money, and all these things. So it was best that all these things are done at a local level. And another good thing about this is that people can directly participate in decision making. They can come together, how it happens in panchayats and all. So it helps to inculcate a habit of democratic participation. It's more like a democracy where people are coming and having a local government. That's why it is also named as local self government, as in run by self, as in done by the people, run by the people. So the need of decentralization was recognized in our constitution, but then it was not like rigid in form. It was not done very seriously. So since then, when the constitution was made, since then there have been several attempts to make it more rigid or make it more official. That is the third level in villages and towns. And panchayats were actually there. They were always there since earlier times. But like panchayats in villages and municipalities in urban areas were slowly set up, and they were controlled by the state governments earlier, and even the elections were not there properly. They didn't have much resources or powers or money to take care of their area. So there was very little decentralization in effective terms. It was just like naam ke liye. It was there, but not very effective. So major change took place in the year 1992. After this year, many amendments were made, changes were made to the constitution. Some of them are pointed out here, as you see. So after 1992, it was like constitutionally mandatory, compulsory to hold elections, regular elections in local bodies, like in panchayats and municipalities. Earlier, it was not compulsory, or elections were like not like regular and all. So it was made regular and compulsory. And seats are reserved in the elected bodies and executive heads of these institutions for SC, ST, OBC. So that reservation of seat is done for these deprived classes. Then at least 1/3 of all positions are reserved for women. This is the best thing actually, which was done, that in panchayats and municipals, 1/3, that is almost 33% of the seats, would be reserved for women. And the next point is that an independent institution called the State Election Commission was created in each state, which would conduct the panchayat and municipal elections. So earlier there was no such proper institution to carry out these elections, but after 1992, the State Election Commission, other than the central like election commission that we have, other than that, at state level also it was done, to hold elections at that level. Then, last but not the least, the state governments were required to share some powers and revenue with local government bodies. So it differs from state to state, but it has to be shared. Like money has to be shared, powers have to be shared by the state governments, as in to the municipalities and all the panchayats that were present in the state. So that was a very big step taken, which helped in decentralization. Now, see, the rural local government, that is the panchayat system that we have, it's like very age old, and it is known by the name Panchayati Raj. So each village, if it's a big one or if it's a small one, then it's like a group of villages. So they had they used to have a gram panchayat. Now this gram panchayat, it's like a council where all the ward members are there, and they are often called as panch. This is a local name which is different for different places. So the head is known as sarpanch in some areas. In some areas, it is also known by the name president, or Gambura in some places, local places of Assam. It is known by these names. So a person heading all these people, and they take all the major decisions that have been taken there. So these people are elected, first thing, by all the voting population living in that part of the village. Now, this panchayat, as in, works under the overall supervision of the Gram Sabha. So all the voters in the village are its members, and they have like meetings and all, twice or thrice in a year. They meet to discuss their budget, and to review the performance of the Gram Panchayat, how they are working and not. So this is the panchayat system. Now this system or structure goes right up to the district level from the village level. So first, a few gram panchayats are together. What we studied just now is a gram panchayat. Now there are few gram panchayats which are clubbed together, brought together, and that is known as a panchayat samiti or block or mandal. These are the names it is known by. Now the members of this representative body are most all elected by the panchayat members in that area, and all the panchayat samitis or mandals, that is at the block level, means they are all brought again together at district level, and there they are known by a name called Zilla Parishad, as you can see here. Zilla Parishad, Zilla as in district, and at that level, that's why Zilla Parishad. So all the members of the Zilla Parishad are elected, and all these MLAs and all of that area and other officials of district level are also the members of this Zilla Parishad. So the Zilla Parishad's chairperson is the political head of Zilla Parishad. So the head is known as chairperson. Similarly, about the municipality, that is the local level at town or city level, these are local bodies, means which are known by the name municipality or municipality board in towns, and big cities are constituted into municipal corporation. Corporation and board, that is difference, or just municipality. If it's a corporation, then you have to understand that it is a big city. Due to that, it's called a municipal corporation. Now, both are elected by bodies of people's representative. I mean to say that these are controlled by elected bodies consisting of people's representation and representatives, sorry. And municipal chairperson is the political head of the municipality. So if you're asked like who is the head of municipal body or municipality or municipal board, then that would be chairperson. And if you're asked who is the head of municipal corporation, it would be mayor. So the two people responsible at the two levels. For small municipalities, it is a chairperson. For big municipal corporations, it's a mayor. So these are the two positions which are responsible for running the third tier of government at small town level and big city level. Here you can see some paper cuttings where things are discussed about the third tier, as in why, how, what happened, and all this. One good thing is that, see, 1 million women elected to panchayat. So just now we studied that 1/3 of the seats are for women. So many women are getting elected, and that is shown in this newspaper clip, as we see. Moving on, if we go to the last page of this chapter, here experiment done in Brazil is discussed, that how in Brazil, in areas parallelly with the local administrative setup, like municipal setup and all, people set up their own form of administration or own form of kind of government which they looked after, which they did a very strong participation in. So their elected leaders were also looking after the places, and even they were like individually very much a part of running their city or town in a very successful way. So you can go through this story of experiment in Brazil and how it proved to be a very good experiment. It resulted in a very good thing. Now, the chapter concludes with the idea that the system of local government that we just now saw about the municipalities and panchayats is the largest experiment done in any democracy in the world. Like, we have around 36 lakh elected representatives, which is a huge number, so huge that it is bigger than the population of many countries actually. And constitutional status for local government has helped to deepen democracy in our country with the introduction of the third tier of government, that is municipalities and panchayats. And like, when more powers were given to them, the democratic setup became more powerful. The democratic setup became more in use. Another very good thing about this system, is that the women's representation. So in this system, the women got reservation, unlike the parliament and all, where there is no such representation, or like no such reserved seats for women. But here they have got that, and they have made use of it in a very nice way, so they can voice their problems and take part in the democratic and political setup in the country. At the same time, there are many difficulties as well. What difficulties? So you can point out, the difficulties can be pointed out, like while elections are held regularly and enthusiastically, Gram Sabhas are not held regularly. So in panchayats, the Gram Sabhas are not very regular. Then again, most state governments, they are like hesitant or reluctant to transfer powers to the local government. So like, when the state governments have to share money and resources and powers with the municipality and the local level panchayats and all, they don't do it properly all the time, and these all problems are there. But we realize that because it has started like in 1992, so there is a long way to go now to realize all the powers of self government, and India is looking forward to go to it, or looking forward to achieve a better condition of these panchayats and municipals in the coming years, and fulfill the idea of decentralization in its best possible way. So that was about the chapter. I hope you understood. There are many sources, cases, examples discussed in the chapter which I have not discussed in this video. It is for you to read it, understand it, and relate it with the chapter, and you can get good insight about the chapter from there. So if you have any queries, you can post it down below the video. I would love to answer them. Thank you so much.